Some of you might already be shouting, but DarthZombie, how can you make a video about fear when you'll have to compete with others that gathered tens of millions of views on this wonderful platform? Wasn't your channel's SEO awful enough already when they see this? But you know what? This isn't about the algorithm. This is, at the end of the day, a game that I've played perhaps dozens of times. I mean, yeah, sure, around that time I just connected to the internet and there was little I was doing with my time besides devouring games. Back then, I had a lot of patience to play them up to completion, but when something really caught my fancy, you best be sure I was gonna play it at least several times. F.E.A.R was beyond that, up there with other heavy hitters which I kept coming back to because they're just so damn good. Released in 2005 by Monolith, it's widely regarded as one of the most iconic shooters of its generation. But is anyone even surprised seeing Monolith associated with an absolute banger? I mean, pretend Blood 2 doesn't exist. Oh yeah, and Warner Brothers just announced they're gonna close it down as I'm writing this, so isn't gaming wonderful? For those of you that don't watch this from a deep feeling of nostalgia, F.E.A.R puts you in the shoes of an elite soldier of a unit specially created to deal with paranormal threats. His name? Point Man. Since nobody else has a name this dumb, I just have to assume his parents gave him this name as if Oxford Comma Man was too much of a mouthful or something. What an awful joke, Jesus. The unit is called into action after a psychic operative called Paxton Fettel revolted against Armorcan, the owners of this very ethical project which gave him telepathic control over an army of clone soldiers. It even takes place in 2025, so for all those haters out there claiming this is science fiction, well, think again. The objective is to drop in, execute the troublesome commander, and hopefully shut down the entire army in one fell swoop. I'm pretty sure you guessed it by now, but that's not gonna take just 5 minutes, isn't it? Before I go any further, I want to let you know that I have a Patreon page which you can support to your heart's content. I also have a Twitter account where I occasionally post updates and such because the feature of community posts on YouTube was designed by Caveman. Holy shit, look at this, 2x5? What kind of image format is this? Getting this thing to run nowadays is its own challenge. I'm talking here about several patches just to get it stable enough to not run at awful frame rates, and yet it's still a jittery mess. So in case you are wondering, no, it's not your internet connection that makes some of this footage look weird, and you're not witnessing hours of me undergoing hours upon hours of continuous strokes either. And I didn't even bother putting the fix for the broken shadows for the most of the playthrough either, so yay. In case it's not very clear, the game dabbles in horror stuff, and you know what? I don't care that much for it. I'd rather get this out of the way now because I'm very well aware that this genre is treated with reverence by quite a few people. Well, not me, that's for sure. This isn't me trying to pretend that I have nerves of steel and I never jump at, scary stuff. In fact, F.E.A.R itself has moments that got a reaction out of me. And even without the jump scares, the game does well to recreate its horror atmosphere. What can I say? Monolith has a wealth of experience on this subject and did a very good job applying it here as well. After a quick level that's there just to set the mood and have the rogue commander Paxton Fettel give you a plank of wood right in your face,
his reflexes are totally off the charts.
You're joining some Delta Force operatives at a water treatment plant to intercept the Replica forces. Yeah, Fettel's clone army are called Replica. This is the second Blade Runner reference in consecutive videos of mine, and it's not even intentional. Hey, wait a minute, is this operator's name Niculescu? Holy shit, Romania's mentioned, I gotta let everyone know about... He gets killed in 2 minutes. Sheer disappointment aside, it's from here where the fun stuff begins. That's right, we encounter the first enemies and it's instantly clear why F.E.A.R carries the reputation it has. Naturally, I'm talking about the AI and the shooting itself, both being so freaking good it's a damn shame I have to pick one to talk about first. Let's go with the AI, shall we? The enemies in F.E.A.R are extremely fun to fight against without the exaggeration. Every encounter has you facing a squad of soldiers that's ready to pounce once they notice your presence. You'll quickly realize that their actions and movement isn't what you'd expect from a first-person shooter. They don't zerg rush your positions, they don't glue themselves to the closest piece of cover to take repetitive pot shots at you from, they don't do choreographed bullshit, none of that stuff. Instead, they have a whole arsenal of tactics that, funnily enough, surpass what a bunch of players do in online shooters, truth be told. Remember kids, you shouldn't be afraid of machine learning AI in 2025, because most of you were already surpassed by what a smart scripter was able to pull off 20 years ago. The enemy soldiers can throw grenades to force you out of cover, they wait for backup before moving in on your positions, they provide covering fire when someone has to change positions, and most importantly, they clearly communicate all this between each other. The amount of extremely specific lines is simply staggering, unlike any other shooter out there. Half-Life went the fancy way by recording a series of keywords and then spliced them up together to generate the required lines, but in F.E.A.R, every phrase you hear is recorded in its entirety. Sure, all that chatter gives you a big advantage, especially when they clue you in that you're about to run into a new squad around the corner, but it goes such a long way into giving you an illusion of an AI that thinks. Best part is that the AI also knows when to shut up. When they're sending men to flank you while others keep you busy, you won't hear a pip from them as they're mowing your distracted ass down. Same goes for when there's only one soldier left alive after his terrified voice concludes that they're all alone, you'll have to play a game of cat and mouse to find him. Sometimes that part's a bit annoying because in several instances he's just standing in place and waits you to poke your head in his field of vision so he can unload all his guts, and that's it. Of course, this doesn't stop you from employing the same tactics as them. Benefiting from the really good level design, you have access to multiple paths to take advantage of. You can pull away and break contact in hopes to draw them away from their barricaded positions into your traps, for example. Or, even better, you can flank them yourself and make quick work of the surprised bastards. All these work because of one of the nicest features of F.E.A.R's AI, which is that they lack omniscience. They only know what they are able to see themselves, and as such, you are also aware of the information you're giving them. They'll notice your flashlight and they'll react to your gunfire when you're away from them. When they move to new positions or attempt to flank you, they operate based on the last location you were spotted, and they start sweeping the area to track you down when they realize you broke contact. It creates a very organic feeling to the whole experience that is unmatched in the vast majority of shooters out there, even multiplayer shooters. This impression is enhanced by everything involving the combat itself. It's so good I'm even able to get over the fact that there's a 3-weapon carrying limit, which I can only interpret as a weird way to one-up the dreadful industry standard of 2. That being said, combat is a wonderful spectacle, and many elements contribute to this. Once you press a trigger, a whole bunch of stuff is there to stimulate your senses. The muzzle flash lights up the dark hallways that make up a big part of the environment. Tracers zoom across the room, and bullet impact results in either blood gushing out of your opponents or a bunch of sparks, dust, and debris flying erratically as you hit everything else around them. All the props that litter the levels react in spectacular ways to each wayward bullet that strikes them. Add in grenades and proximity mines and you've got the recipe for turning every room you fight in into a devastated mess you can barely make a sense of, and that's freaking awesome. Your aim may be good, and it won't help you much when your screen's filled up with dust, debris, and all the lights are dancing wildly to the point where it's hard to make sense of where the enemies are. I've had more than one instance where I actually had to wait for dust and smoke to dissipate before carrying on because they were completely blocking my vision. I said this in the past, but it's a damn shame competitive multiplayer has made today's shooters forget that the visual spectacle is fun. If that wasn't enough, the weapons themselves play a big role in this spectacle. The SMG is spraying bullets and turns any room you press the trigger in into pure chaos. The rifle thuds one bullet after another at long ranges and rips chunks out of the walls behind your targets. And the penetrator is a scarily accurate gun for whenever you face the better armored replica soldiers. Later in the game, you gain access to heavy hitters such as the rocket launcher, the particle rifle, or the repeating cannon, each of them bringing more devastation during firefights. And don't get me wrong, they are fun to use and all that, but nothing holds a candle to this game's wonderful shotgun. If its clacks and clunks weren't scary enough, this gun offers one of the fastest ways of turning your living and breathing opponents into chunks of limbs and wall-splattered blood. I don't even care if it reloads one shell just as fast as 12, this iconic boomstick thoroughly deserves its place in the annals of FPS history. I'm not going to talk much about the story because it's pretty thin given that it's only there to support the atmosphere and give you an excuse to the mayhem you're gonna cause. The setup on the other hand, oh boy. In short, as you progress through the game and scrounge data from the Alienware laptops everyone or Armor Camp seems to have been using, great use of funds from the IT department by the way, the whole crisis seems to have been caused by a failed military project that took place decades earlier. That project involved a series of inhumane experiments done on Alma, a young child that exhibited psychic powers. Once she started fighting back by using her powers to harm the researchers and the facility itself, she was first heavily sedated and then later used as a vessel to produce offspring with their own psychic powers. At 15 years old. If that wasn't bad enough, Alma's father was the leading researcher of these projects and used part of his own DNA for the latter part. What a lovely and ethical company. Anyway, Paxton Farrell was the result of these horrors beyond my comprehension and becomes telepathically bonded with his mother. The first time he does this at 10 years old, he killed multiple people, prompting Armacam to kill Alma and keep her body locked away in the vault. The second time, well, the start of the game happened, because while still dead, Alma's psychic presence lived on, for the lack of a better word, and determined Fettel to try to find her. That leads back to Pointman and his efforts to neutralize Paxton Farrell and disarm the situation. For most of the game, you're one step behind the replica forces in a constant race to catch up with him. After trudging through the water treatment plant, you then have to quickly move out to the Armacam headquarters where the brunt of Fettel's forces moved out. Even if I mentioned that the level design is extremely well done, I don't think it's a controversial thing to say that the game's appearance is very boxy and claustrophobic. Up until the end of the game, you're moving out through narrow hallways with the occasional large connecting rooms, all of them being very indoors and very square. I mean, sure, you spend quite a bit of time on the rooftops of Armacam, but let's be real, these are about as outdoor as Quake 2's levels were. The saving grace is that the lighting and overall art direction make these a lot more bearable. But don't you go in fear expecting any semblance of variety in this sense. The criticism regarding a lack of variety can be extended to the enemy selection. As much as I gushed about how exciting it is to fight them, for the most part of the game you're only fighting replica soldiers. The longer you progress, the harder and harder the encounters become, but don't bring anything fundamentally new to the table. There might be a couple of soldiers with more advanced guns, better accuracy and more health, but they will employ the same arsenal of tactics against you. That's not to say there aren't any other types of enemies, but not only they aren't numerous, but they are also not as interesting to fight against. Just to give you an idea, let's explore each one of them, shall we? The first special enemy you encounter is the heavy armor soldier. It's big, slow, bulky, and well, armored. How do you kill it? Well, you enter slow motion and spam your guns and grenades until it drops dead. Or you throw 3 proximity mines in the place you know he'll be entering the room. Then you have the assassin, who stays invisible until he jumps out and attempts to kung fu your ass. It's got a really cool design with high-pitched noise and distortions cluing you in on their position. Unfortunately, you can just enter slow-mo and one-shot them with a well-deserved point-blank shotgun. Didn't help that I remembered the position of about half of them, and before you think I'm bragging, there's only 10 of them in the entire game, so it's not like there's many to begin with. Then you have the powered armor, which is a mini mech warrior that fires a huge barrage of rockets in your direction. Well, you guessed it, you enter slow-mo, blast it with everything you've got, retreat if you run out of juice, and repeat until it's dead. In case you think I'm using the slow motion as a crutch, remember that I barely use it against the regular replica soldiers because as cool as the effects are, I feel it takes away from the firefight spectacle I mentioned earlier. These special enemies, which add up to a whopping total of 30, are just not that fun to fight against. This creates a secondary problem of the game feeling like it drags on towards the end of the game. You keep going through encounter after encounter that plays out in similar manner. There are few special set pieces, such as a closed door being smashed open by a new wave of soldiers, or a powered armor chasing you through a cramped abandoned apartment building, or having a rooftop sniper battle. But not only they are few and far between, they don't provide that much extra spice. Don't even get me started on the turrets or on those fucking flying drones. To top it all off, the ending is pretty lackluster outside of the story being wrapped up. Okay, seeing this explosion up close and personal is pretty damn badass. F.E.A.R has 2 expansions, Extraction Point and Perseus Mandate. There's not a lot for me to say about them that wasn't already mentioned for the base game. The most interesting part about them is that they were not made by Monolith, but by Timegate Studios. Yeah, no, the guys who made the world famous Aliens Colonial Marines. Why is this interesting? Well, it's because they are not considered canon for the series, as Monolith thought it was too hard to marry the events in the expansions with what they wanted to do in the sequel. So, if you want to play for the sake of the story, you can skip them. All in all, F.E.A.R is one of the greats in shooter history. While fully aware that what I'm about to say is under the influence of the news of Monolith's closure, this game in particular might be the pinnacle of their craft. It's already a high word of praise regardless of the studio we'd be talking about, but Monolith, man, they were special, weren't they? I guess the saddest part of their demise is that for the past decade they lived as a zombified version of themselves, shackled to Warner Brothers' shiny IPs. Sad news aside, thanks to everyone for watching the video. Click the fancy buttons and share this video with your like-minded fellows. And until next time, cheers!